Richard James Flaherty, known as the 4'9" giant killer, defied expectations and etched his name into military history. Standing at a mere 4 feet 9 inches and weighing a slight 97 pounds, this Vietnam War veteran shattered stereotypes as the smallest man to serve in the U.S. Army. Despite initial doubts and obstacles due to his stature, Flaherty's unwavering determination propelled him into fulfilling his lifelong dream of joining the armed forces. Throughout his remarkable career, he not only proved his mettle on the battlefield, but also challenged conventional notions, leaving an unforgettable mark as a true giant in spirit and resolve. So join us as we unravel the untold story of the 4'9" giant killer. Richard Flaherty's early life changes. Richard James Flaherty came into the world in a hospital room at Stamford Hospital in coastal Connecticut, just 3 days after Thanksgiving in 1948. He was the second child of the family, and this seemingly ordinary event held a twist of fate that would shape his life from the start. What his mother didn't know then was that her blood type was Rh negative, a detail that wouldn't affect the firstborn, but could pose challenges for subsequent siblings like Richard, depriving them of oxygen and leaving them susceptible to various developmental issues. Donna Marlin, Flaherty's cousin, reflects on this early struggle, noting they didn't have this knowledge back then, but it played a role in his story. Despite its hurdle, it's clear that Flaherty's stature may have been affected, but his intelligence remained unaffected. Growing up in a blue-collar neighborhood in Stamford, Flaherty shared a modest home with his older brother, Walter. Their father worked as a salesman and shipping clerk, juggling responsibilities to make ends meet, while their mother contributed to the family income through her job at a local department store. Despite the challenges, Flaherty's childhood was marked by a strong bond with his cousin Marlin, who fondly recalls their inseparable days. "I always admired his sharp mind," she reminisces, highlighting the resilience and determination that would come to define Flaherty's journey. At the time of his high school graduation, Flaherty fell 3 inches short of the Army's minimum height requirement of 5 feet and weighed less than 100 pounds, much lighter than what military guidelines dictated. Fast forward to October the 10th of 1966 at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where a bus arrives carrying a group of new recruits. As they step off the bus, they're greeted by a drill instructor barking orders and insults, marking the beginning of their journey into military life. The atmosphere is tense yet familiar, with the drill sergeant pushing them to become resilient soldiers. Among these recruits stands Richard J. Flaherty, noticeably smaller than his peers at 4'9" or 145 centimeters. His stature catches the attention of Sergeant Baker, who marches him to the captain's office, expressing concern about Flaherty's ability to handle the challenges ahead. Flaherty, however, boldly asserts his determination, pleading for a chance to prove himself despite his size. The captain's response is clear. If Sergeant Baker can't break Flaherty, he'll have to keep him. Thus begins a period of intense scrutiny and bullying from fellow recruits, who taunt him with names like Dwarf, Leprechaun, and Private Mighty Mouse. Charlie Skaggs, a larger recruit, takes it upon himself to dissuade Flaherty from pursuing a military career, doubting his capabilities in critical situations like rescuing injured comrades during combat. Flaherty's heroic actions in Vietnam. Flaherty may have been vertically challenged, but his strength and determination were second to none. He excelled in every challenge the Army threw his way, proving to be a model recruit in all aspects except height. The drill sergeant had one last opportunity to test Flaherty's mettle, hand-to-hand combat training. Paired with Charlie Skaggs, who had been skeptical of Flaherty's abilities, the tension was palpable. As the whistle blew, Flaherty unleashed a whirlwind of strikes, targeting Skaggs' vulnerable spots with precision and speed. Despite Skaggs' size advantage, Flaherty's agility and ferocity were unmatched, earning him cheers from onlookers. Although Skaggs eventually overpowered him due to sheer weight difference, Flaherty's resilience and fighting spirit left a lasting impression. The two adversaries, now bonded by mutual respect, shook hands, marking the beginning of a newfound friendship and ending any doubts about Flaherty's capabilities. Fast forward to April the 19th of 1968. Flaherty had risen to the rank of lieutenant in the 501st Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division, deployed in the dense jungles of Vietnam. Leading his platoon in Operation Delaware, Flaherty faced intense combat as they encountered enemy fire and grenades. In a critical moment, Flaherty's quick thinking and courage shone through as he grabbed grenades and directed his men in a daring maneuver to flank the enemy bunker. Despite the heavy fire, Flaherty's leadership and bravery kept his platoon focused and determined, showcasing his unwavering dedication to his unit and mission. Amidst preparations for an assault, a barrage of RPGs rains down, hurling Flaherty into the air and rendering him unconscious from shrapnel wounds to the head. Despite the severity of his injuries and the blood loss, Flaherty, known for his resilience as the 1-meter lieutenant, refuses to stay down. He regains consciousness, shakes off the daze, and immediately focuses on neutralizing the enemy position. Assessing the daunting situation with the enemy bunker strategically placed and well defended, Flaherty devises a plan, leveraging the 90mm M67 recoilless rifle in their arsenal. He directs his men to fire 3 rounds every 10 seconds, with intervals to prevent the rifle from overheating. While his men handle the firepower, Flaherty takes decisive action, sprinting uphill towards the bunker, drawing enemy fire away from his comrades. Despite being a target and narrowly avoiding a bullet to the heel, Flaherty presses on, reaching cover and allowing his men to set up the M67 behind a tree trunk. With precise aim, the rifle unleashes its destructive force, hitting the bunker and sending dirt flying, marking a crucial moment in the assault on the enemy stronghold. Flaherty's battle for survival. The battle rages on in the thick forest. Bullets fly as the M67 gunner takes aim and fires, hitting the sandbags with a loud boom. Dirt and sand explode into the air, momentarily blinding Flaherty with debris. Despite the chaos, his team seizes the opportunity created by the diversion and moves in to neutralize the bunker. As the day progresses, the Viet Cong forces push back, leading to confusion and a trap squad. The main American group fights fiercely, using claymores and tripwires to defend themselves, but AK-47 fire keeps them pinned down. The situation grows dire as more than 15 men are injured, and the medic works tirelessly to treat them. Desperate for support, they request evacuation and artillery backup, but the intensity of the firefight makes extraction impossible. Flaherty realizes with alarm that a squad is missing outside their defense perimeter, preventing them from calling in artillery strikes. The stakes are high as they struggle to hold their ground and survive the relentless assault. As night descends, the intensity of the battle eases, but the Americans understand that survival until morning is uncertain. With stealth, the Vietnamese infiltrate and disarm the booby traps, posing a grave threat. Flaherty realizes they must rescue the missing squad and call for backup to stand a chance. Scouring fallen Vietnamese soldiers, they find a slightly oversized uniform. Undeterred by the fit, Flaherty adapts, equipping himself with an AK-47 as his sole weapon. Concealing his identity with mud and a lowered helmet, he instructs his men to stay while he ventures out, promising, "I'll be back." Under the guise of the enemy, Flaherty drags a fallen soldier toward their lines, drawing encouragement from the Vietnamese. His disguise holds as he navigates the camp, eventually locating 3 of his men near the abandoned bunker. Using a secret code, he confirms their identity and reunites with 7 more men. With the enemy dangerously close, they cautiously approach the platoon's location. In a tense moment, they sprint towards safety, shouting the coded phrase to avoid friendly fire. The daring rescue highlights their determination to survive amidst the chaos of war. As the Viet Cong realize they've been deceived, they unleash a torrent of attacks. Despite the chaos, 6 men, including Flaherty, breach the perimeter, prompting Flaherty to call in artillery support. The thunderous impact of the howitzer fire devastates the Viet Cong positions. The next day, 5 helicopters arrive at the scene of destruction, but Flaherty's quick actions have saved his platoon. His bravery and leadership earn him a Silver Star for his valor during that intense battle, earning him the nickname Giant Killer. Flaherty's dedication to service doesn't end there. He goes on to spend 13 months in Vietnam, where he distinguishes himself further, eventually earning a Green Beret. His expertise leads to deployment in Thailand, where he imparts his knowledge and counterinsurgency tactics to Thai units, continuing his legacy of courage and commitment beyond his initial tour of duty. Flaherty's life after the military. In 1971, when Flaherty left the military, official documents noted that he had received a Bronze Star, at least 2 Purple Hearts, a National Defense Service Medal, and a Combat Infantry Badge for his service. Despite suffering only minor physical injuries like a small head wound from a grenade fragment, Flaherty carried deeper wounds in his mind. He shared with mental health counselors the harrowing experiences he had witnessed during combat. He recounted the gruesome scenes of his friends losing their lives to landmines, describing how these explosions tore apart their bodies. He vividly remembered the unsettling moment when he held the severed thumb of a fellow soldier who survived an explosion. Another memory etched in his mind was encountering a young Viet Cong fighter in a hiding spot, seeing her fatally injured with her brains exposed. He also found a bag containing her personal items like lipstick and perfume nearby. Reflecting on these experiences, Flaherty later wrote in a disability application that these encounters humanized the enemy for him, affecting his ability to lead effectively. Upon his return in 1971, Flaherty headed to New York City, where fate led him to encounter Jill Kahn, a captivating 21-year-old with emerald eyes and a cascade of curly golden locks. What made their bond even more intriguing was her stature. She was just an inch shorter than him. Flaherty, enamored, proposed to Kahn, but her father was adamant that she marry within their Jewish community. In search of a refuge, the couple ventured to South Florida. There, Kahn secured a job as a cocktail waitress while Flaherty delved into the realms of finance and psychology at the University of Miami. However, tragedy struck on March the 4th of 1975, casting a shadow over their star-crossed love story. Battling a cocktail of emotions and grappling with a recent diagnosis of manic depression, Kahn drove her 1972 Chevy Vega into a sturdy utility pole along Northeast 163rd Street, hurtling at 80 miles per hour. Whether it was an intentional act remained a haunting question. The loss of Kahn shattered Flaherty's world, leaving him bereft of the prospect of marriage and fatherhood. His grief manifested in excessive consumption, with him turning to 2 bottles of red wine daily. Soon, legal woes entangled his life. In November of that year, he faced his first arrest, charged with carrying a concealed weapon. Although he escaped a conviction, troubles continued to dog his steps. A stint at a local Volkswagen dealership offered a temporary respite, only to be marred by another arrest, this time for dealing cocaine in Pinecrest. The sting operation. By 1981, Flaherty managed to secure a job sorting mail at a post office, but there were troubling signs indicating that he was unraveling. During a visit a few years later, Marlin was taken aback when Flaherty placed an Uzi on the kitchen counter and instructed her to be ready to shoot anyone who wasn't him if the door was opened. Frightened by his behavior, Marlin questioned him, only to be met with a stern response. "Just follow my instructions without asking questions," Flaherty commanded with a raised voice. While Flaherty's actions seemed erratic, there was a backstory Marlin wasn't aware of. He had been caught by federal authorities for selling silencers to an undercover ATF agent. In exchange for his freedom, Flaherty agreed to act as a confidential informant in a case targeting 2 corrupt Green Berets. The operation unfolded in August of 1984 at a shabby motel in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Flaherty, armed with $3,000 from the feds, engaged in a transaction to purchase a significant amount of stolen military explosives from Master Sergeant Keith Anderson, who was based at Fort Bragg. However, this transaction was orchestrated as part of a sting operation. 7 weeks later, federal agents apprehended Anderson with a truckload of stolen explosives and ammunition in Vero Beach, making headlines nationwide. Anderson and his accomplice, Byron Carlisle, were subsequently sentenced to lengthy prison terms in 1985. While Flaherty excelled in his undercover role, the stress of his work exacerbated his challenges in transitioning back to civilian life. Although he managed to conceal his struggles, Marlin observed subtle changes in him. The war affected everyone differently, she reflects. Some cope better than others. In December of 1986, Flaherty became convinced that he was being followed by individuals who claimed had made multiple attempts on his life. They've never been caught, he confided to a psychiatrist, as documented in his medical records. They have connections in D.C. and trying to kill me because I made a lot of money for certain people. By the following year, Flaherty abruptly stopped going to work, citing a pressing need to leave town due to threats against him. He explained to a psychiatrist, "I had to get away because someone was targeting me." Whether Flaherty's paranoia had spiraled out of control or if there were real dangers from his past gun-running activities, by the end of 1987, he found himself homeless. He settled under a palm tree along Aventura Boulevard, blending into the ranks of those without homes. He slept outdoors, relied on public restrooms for bathing, and frequented Publix as part of his routine. His existence appeared modest yet sad. For years, Flaherty lived a solitary life. Despite the potential benefits, he never disclosed his decorated veteran status to law enforcement, shopkeepers, or even cinema staff. He maintained sporadic contact with his cousin Marlin, but grew distant from his older brother. In Aventura, he had no close companions or confidants, but this was about to change. Uzic's encounter and the tragic end of Richard Flaherty. For 2 weeks, police officer David A. Uzic, a 46-year-old from Brooklyn, had been dining with Flaherty. Despite his 69 years, Flaherty's weathered forehead and thick eyebrows lent him an appearance beyond his age. Although they had been acquainted for over 10 years, Uzic had only just discovered Flaherty's captivating backstory, a narrative woven with international intrigue that appeared almost too extraordinary to believe. It turned out that the small-statured man who sought shelter under a palm tree was none other than a former Green Beret captain adorned with a collection of Purple Hearts and a Silver Star. This revelation left Uzic in awe, prompting him to embark on a documentary project to showcase Flaherty's remarkable life. On a particular evening in May of 2015, Flaherty arrived a few minutes late, sporting a graying mustache peeking from beneath a floppy bucket hat that shielded his bald head. Inside the restaurant, the two men savored chicken legs and sweet potatoes, while Flaherty recounted tales from his early years and military exploits, which Uzic diligently transcribed in his notes. As Uzic's dinner break drew to a close, the men bid farewell with a handshake, a gesture that held significance as Flaherty, grappling with arthritis and self-conscious about his petite hands, trusted the younger man. However, their parting took an unexpected turn when Flaherty launched into a peculiar tirade. "These State Department guys are tailing me," he remarked nonchalantly, catching Uzic off guard. "And you're one of them." "Rich, what on earth are you talking about?" Uzic responded, bewildered by the sudden accusation. "We've known each other for years." Flaherty seemed to ease off after this exchange, offering a wave goodbye before ambling away. Meanwhile, Uzic, still perplexed by the encounter, headed back to complete his shift. Neither man knew the long span of their slow friendship was about to come to a screeching halt. In the quiet hours of May the 9th of 2015, Leslie Sokoloff, a 60-year-old stenographer with years of service at the Miami-Dade Police Department, was on her way home near the towering 17-story building where Richard Flaherty spent his nights. Just a block away from her condo, her car collided with an object, and without stopping, she continued on her way. The following morning, as she passed through the intersection, Sokoloff noticed a yellow tarp covering what appeared to be a body. It wasn't until she searched online later that day that she discovered the tragic news of Richard Flaherty, a Vietnam veteran who had been the victim of a hit and run. Stricken with grief and guilt, Sokoloff surrendered to the Aventura police, taking responsibility for the accident. The loss of Flaherty was a devastating blow to those who knew him, including Uzic, who had been working on a documentary about his life. With Flaherty's sudden passing, Uzic found himself grappling with unanswered questions about Flaherty's experiences and activities during his time in Aventura, realizing the complexity of the story he aimed to tell. The initial puzzle emerged shortly after Flaherty's passing when his unusual burial request surfaced. Long before his death, he had made a $3,000 deposit for a burial plot in West Virginia, next to a woman named Lisa Inez Davis. This raised eyebrows among his family, who had no knowledge of Davis or the town of Milton. Usyk, delving into Flaherty's past, uncovered a letter from 2008 where Flaherty professed his love for Lisa, stating it had lasted over 3 decades and would endure beyond death. Despite his family's desire for him to rest in Arlington National Cemetery, they honored Flaherty's final wish, and on June the 10th of 2015, he received military honors at his burial in West Virginia. Yet Usyk was determined to unravel more about Flaherty's enigmatic life. He discovered that Flaherty was not destitute, contrary to common assumptions about homeless individuals. Despite receiving a modest government allowance of $376 monthly, Flaherty regularly sent money to someone in Thailand and had substantial investments in stocks and bonds. After his passing, Marlon, his cousin, was surprised to find that Flaherty had left her a considerable sum of money, equivalent to a modest yearly income. These revelations painted a complex picture of Flaherty's life, leaving Usyk with more questions than answers. Usyk would later write in his book, The Giant Killer, "As a veteran police officer, I can affirm there are no words more chilling to hear than 'I have to tell you who I really am.' This statement, uttered by a tiny homeless man, changed my life forever. It would be the last investigation in my 20-year police career, dragging me down the rabbit hole of CIA conspiracies and stolen classified weapons."